Hey cuties, we're finally here. Welcome to the Halloween special. I've been really excited about this video. Me and my Discord mod team have been prepping for it for a few weeks now, and more or less, we've got some wonderful submissions from our very own Discord cuties with Halloween stories that they either wrote or experienced themselves. I'm only going to be reading about 5 of them today, but there were a lot of really great submissions, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who participated. I personally went through and read every single thing in the submissions channel, and there was just so many good stories. You guys had me on the edge of my seat so many times. The 5 that I'm reading today are definitely some of my favorites, but it was really hard to pick which ones I was going to use because they were just all so good. I'm thinking we're going to do another one of these Halloween videos next year just because of how fun this was. That is, of course, assuming you guys like the stories. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first story that we're going to be reading tonight was written by Skitscat Scott, one of my very own demi-moderators. Thank you so much for your submission. This story is actually based on a real-life occurrence of theirs, and let me tell you, it gets pretty freaky. So I hope you guys like it. Here we go. This story takes place when I was pretty young. I don't remember how old, but old enough to remember the story pretty clearly. My family and I had just moved into a new apartment. It took a few days to settle in, and everything seemed fine and normal. After a few weeks, though, things started to get weird. I think the first instance was in the kitchen. We had one of those large water bottle coolers, and out of nowhere, one flew across the kitchen, slamming into the wall with a loud bang. It didn't make any sense. I mean, there was no way it could have been moved that far or fast without someone throwing it, but none of us were near it. After this, other small occurrences began to happen. Objects moving, weird sounds in the rooms, whispering, the like. A few nights after the bottle incident, though, things got a lot worse. I was lying in my room trying to sleep, but with all the stuff going on, it wasn't the easiest. I rolled onto my back to try and relax, and that's when I saw it. At first, it just looked like a weird malformed shadow, like the ceiling was shaped weird or something, but the longer I stared at it, the more it began to take the shape of a figure, and it felt like it was calling out to me. I was terrified. Like, I thought my life was in danger. So I did what any kid my age would do and screamed for my mom, and she came barreling into the room within moments, but when she got there, the shadow figure was gone. She ushered me back to sleep, convinced I was just seeing things, and the night ended. Things seemed normal for a little bit after that. I want to say about a week, but I'm not exactly sure. It's been a long time. But then one day I just got this dramatic urge to draw something I wasn't quite sure of. And just to explain, I wasn't a misbehaved child. I rarely did things that would warrant my parents getting upset with me. But I just couldn't control myself. I grabbed my pack of crayons and began scribbling all over the walls of my room like a madman. My mom came in to check on me and was horrified at what she found. I had covered my entire bedroom walls in hundreds of weird symbols and shapes with no rhyme or reason. I was an emotional mess and was scared and shaking. Even though I had been the one drawing them, it didn't make sense to me. Honestly, I didn't even feel like I was really the one who had been in control. I guess that was the final straw because she had us pack our things and we left the apartment the same day, praying that whatever was there didn't follow us. Alright, and that was Skit Scat Scott's personal story. Whew, I hope you guys liked that one as much as I did. It gave me chills. I mean, there's something about a kid drawing all over the walls and, shadow figures and poltergeist-like stuff that just really drives the Halloween theme home. Hopefully that ghost did not follow you home, Skit Scat Scott. Okay, story number 2 was written by Spatial Visor. I'm actually going to be reading 2 stories from them tonight because they've had some experiences, let's put it that way. Thank you so much for your submissions. They were definitely fun to read, and I hope everyone likes these stories just as much as I did. So, it was around 2 a.m., and I'm walking my dog outside because she often loves to wake up in the middle of the night, bring me for a walk to use the bathroom. She's old, so I understand. So I take her out, and of course it's super dark, but thankfully my neighborhood had a fair amount of street lamps, so it didn't feel too unsafe. There's a little rise off the side of my house, which is where my neighbors live, and that area is blotted off with trees, save for a particular spot where it's just a clear view up towards their property. And there was this big street lamp just flooding the area with an orange light. Now, I live in Puerto Rico, where things aren't quite as organized in terms of property division and house location. I normally don't look up that way because there's not much really to see, especially at night. But while I was walking my dog, I happened to spend more time, leisurely strolling and paid a little bit more attention to the small details. And in that little opening in front of the lamp's light was a pole. A big wooden pole, something that electric companies use as a cheap alternative when constructing new power poles. Except this one was plain. Nothing on top of it. It wasn't strange to see. They normally look like that when they're freshly set up. On the side of that pole was a poster, kind of placed off to the side, so it was like a slanted view of a rectangular poster. I didn't think much of it, so, I kept walking my dog. But as I walked her, I kept looking back to the pole and thought, I don't know, just the whole thing felt kind of weird. And the more I looked at the poster, the more I kept thinking that the poster didn't seem quite right. It wasn't really straight with edges, it was more like it was curved and rounded. It was in front of a lamplight, so I never really was able to make out more details, but the more I stared at it, the less I was convinced it was just a poster. So, yeah, I looked at the pole and the poster, and I didn't let my mind make any certain thoughts, because I knew if I did, I was going to get absolutely terrified, but I just couldn't stop looking at it. I'm a pretty curious person, and I just really wanted to know what I was looking at. It was really weird, even looking back on it. The poster was this weird round shape with a dot and a black line going down the center that connected to the pole. It made no sense, and even though at first glance it would seem like there was nothing to fear, something about it just made me feel like I was someplace I shouldn't be. Or like I was being watched. You know the feeling. Okay, time to go inside. No more pondering, I said to myself. And I decided that the next day I'd check it out when it was light. Maybe it wouldn't seem so weird. So I went to bed and woke up the next morning to my dog whimpering because she wanted to go outside. So I take her. I'm still a bit sleepy, so I'm not really thinking much, but as I walked across my yard, I remembered the previous night. And wiping my eyes, I look up to the clearing in the trees into my neighbor's property. There was no poster hanging off a pole in the clearing. There was no pole standing there in the clearing. It was just a singular light lamp way in the back of the view with the lights out. And that was the moment I retroactively felt my heart plunge into terror in the brightest moment of the day. There we go, Spatial Visor. That was his story about a pole in the middle of the night, which I know doesn't sound that weird, but sometimes things just don't seem right, right? Alright, so now we're going to move on to story number 3. This one is from Jim, another one of my demi-mods, so thank you so much. This is another IRL-based story, so keep in mind these guys have experienced this. It's kind of creepy. Okay, so this story is a few years ago. Me and 5 friends of mine were walking around a pretty dark forest. It was like 11 p.m. or something pretty late. We were searching for abandoned buildings or really any kind of place we could go in without getting caught by random people. After about a good 30 minutes of walking, we had found a pretty modern but completely abandoned house like 50 meters down the road. We set up our tents and camping supplies pretty close to the outside on the side of the main road. I checked my flashlight and headlight and we were good to go. The others were waiting on me, so we all went in together as a group. As soon as we entered, we noticed the first floor was completely wiped clean. I mean, like nothing but walls and broken glass. No furniture or anything you'd expect to see. It looked more like an abandoned warehouse. As we perused the rooms downstairs, we eventually came upon a stairwell. Everything up till this point was pretty boring, so I went over to investigate it and found a small door on the side of it. Inside was nothing except a tiny room filled with dusty, ripped-up feather pillows. At this point, we all figured it was best to move upstairs. And now, the first floor was completely empty, but the second floor was totally different. The first thing to note was the entire floor was covered in some sort of black substance, though at the time we just dismissed it as dirt or something of the like. We split up and began to look around when we heard a loud howl. Keep in mind, this all takes place in the woods, so it was most likely a wolf, but it sounded super close. So I went downstairs to make sure there wasn't any animal friends inside the house with us. I didn't have to walk very far, however, to see something that wasn't quite right. It was dark and I couldn't see properly, but I was positive I had seen someone in the dark hallway. I immediately looked back at my guys who had been at least 3 meters away, staring straight at me. I turned back around to look at the figure and it was gone. I spun around and ran towards my friends to tell them what I saw. They called me stupid and were convinced I was just pulling a prank on them. I wasn't. But I didn't pursue it any further and just laughed it off. I didn't have my headlamp on and, I don't know, maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But I couldn't get it out of my head. We didn't stay in the house much longer after that. Did a quick once-over of the top floor and decided to head back to the tents. But when we got outside, our tents were gone. All of our camping supplies, everything gone, like it wasn't even there to begin with. At this point, we realized something was severely wrong, and we weren't alone. We took what we had on us and ran all the way back up the road and through the forest. The figure I saw downstairs no longer seemed like a joke, but none of us were willing to go back and try to find our missing stuff. I've never been back since, but I still wonder just who or what it was. Oh man, that's something. Jim, I hope you never, ever go back there because that is utterly terrifying and I don't wish that on anybody, but I do have to admit that does make for a pretty great Halloween story. Okay, so this is the second story by Spatial Visor. Between the two of them, this is the one I like a little bit more. It definitely hits home a little bit more than the others, so I hope you guys like it. My family was out for the night, and I was spending it home alone. Frankly, it was a rather boring time since I had taken it upon myself to clean the house as much as possible before they came back. As I labored at my task, I felt an uneasiness begin to creep up on me. I'm not a fan of the dark, or being alone in the dark, so I figured it was just my wandering mind trying to find something to break the monotony of wiping counters and mopping floors. As I moved through the hallway, I heard a soft creaking sound from somewhere in the house. It was particularly odd considering the fact that I had linoleum floors, and last I checked, those don't creak. I went back through the hallway and found the door to my sister's room slightly open, with the light shut off inside. An important note, my sister studies abroad, so her room remains dark and unused for the most part. I peered inside, part of nostalgia of hoping to find my sister sitting at her desk worried about her studies, when I noticed the door slightly moving back and forth, and as it moved, so sounded the mysterious creaking from earlier. It was a rather gentle motion, so I dismissed it without hardly a second thought. I kept on cleaning, and every time I passed by my sister's room, I noticed the same gentle motion, going back and forth, back and forth. Now, there's something special about the door to my sister's room. The wood that was used to construct the door had some imperfections in the wood treatment. They normally give wood, so the door had begun to slowly warp and bend. It's not at the point where if you tried to close it by simply pulling it, the bottom of the door would be jutting inwards, but more of in a curve, so when you try to close the door all the way, you have to use a considerable amount of force to pull the doorknob lock into the socket. And remembering the supposed power of taunting spirits with words, I thought I'd entertain myself by ordering the ghost that was so clearly messing with the door to open it up some so air can go in. And the door creaked open just a bit more. I cracked a smile, more amused at the timing, and I thanked the ghost for being so polite. Over the night, I had made a bit of a game of it. Every time I'd pass my sister's room, I'd either ask the ghost to open the door a bit more, or close it a little bit more. And with mostly coincidental success, the door would do just as I asked. Part of my brain was beating myself over the very cliched and stupid thing to do in horror movies, which was mess with the spooky things. So I figured to dispel any kind of idea that supernatural forces were at work, I asked the ghost to please stop messing around and close the door. One final time. Nothing happened. The door began to do its gentle motion of moving back and forth once more. Finding no more fun to be had pretending, I headed to my room to start the next section of cleaning. And then, bam. I felt my body jump out of my skin as an incredibly harsh and sudden slam echoed throughout the house with an almost violent echo. I turned around to see the room to my sister's door wide open, but nothing but a black void inside. A void which chilled my blood down to the bones. I didn't dare turn away, and so I started stepping backwards into my room. In hindsight, that was probably the smartest move so that my nothing would escape my view, but after what I saw, I wish I hadn't been looking. The darkness I looked into, which kept everything inside from being visible, was not the lack of light in my sister's room, because the black void suddenly dashed away in an uncomfortable and rigid manner before the door slammed close with so much force the doorknob actually locked into the socket. I could feel my eyes widening, an intense feeling of terror and dread washing over my body as I frantically ran into my room and closed the door behind me. I spent the next several hours trembling in fear, to the point where I felt my muscles were going to spasm if they kept shaking so involuntarily. I could almost feel the tears coming to my eyes when I heard the car pull up into the driveway. Even as my family walked in through the front door, I didn't have the nerve to leave the safety of my room until they came for me first. My mom opened the door to my room with such a bright smile as she looked around. She was really pleased. "Oh, wow. You did such a wonderful job cleaning the house. It's absolutely beautiful. I hugged her close and thanked her for her kind words, unable to bring myself to tell her what had happened while I was alone. As my dad and my brother went to the living room to catch a baseball game, my mom had one more thing to note. The whole house looks pretty great, though you have to remember about leaving things plugged into sockets and leaving light switches on when you're done with them. I asked her what she meant, since the only thing left to connect was my phone on the counter, since I had made a habit of disconnecting unused appliances as part of my cleaning. She responded, much to my horror, "Oh, silly, you left the light on in your sister's room." There we go. That was Spatial Visor's second story, and I just gotta say, I love this one. The writing in it is really good, and the thought that the whole time the light was on, or maybe even that it turned the light on, I mean, that sense of mystery really pulls you in, and this one just, oh my god, it gives me chills. I really, really, really like this one. Great job, Spatial Visor. Okay, so we've only got one story left. I hope you guys have been enjoying this as much as I have. This has been so fun, and all of you cuties in my Discord are just so talented, and it's been fantastic getting this opportunity to read your guys' stories to everyone. And I hope those of you who weren't part of the story submission event are enjoying hearing these stories for the first time. We're going to go ahead and move on to the last and final one. This was written by my mod and close friend Extractor. This one's going to blow all of you away, so get ready. The story title is The Dive. Here we go. Journal entry, September 21st, 1923. Hello again, old friend. It's been some time since you and I last spoke. I believe 5 years or so now. Well, no matter. I come to write to you today about something odd going on. I've been having this dream, or rather nightmare, over and over and over again, nonstop. People are crying and screaming, yet I can't make out what they say. As the dream goes on, the crying and screaming ceases, and no one is around. All I see are these strange statues with horrified expressions. I've come to realize in my waking hours that these are not statues, though, unfortunately, but the people in the dream world who are crying and screaming in agony. The nightmare, however, does not end there. As I make my way through this dreamscape, the statues start to crack, crumble, and break. And as they do, strange, distorted screams emanate from where they once were, before falling silent once again. I'm not sure what any of it means, to be honest. At the end of the dream, it makes no sense to me. It always ends with me walking up to a pier and staring out into the black nothingness. And every time I wake up, I can always smell the salty sea air. Well, I have to get going to work. It was a good time talking with you, old friend. Hopefully I can do this more often. The day begins late for Richard Thomas, a young adult just barely getting started in life, currently working at a diner, making some spare money in order to keep his life going. The small state of Rhode Island is where Richard has spent most of his life growing up, making friends and losing old ones. As Richard grew up, he was told different folk tales about Rhode Island and the waters around it. Some were happy, like how merfolk would help young children swept out to the sea back to the shore. Others, however, were not so happy. One's talking of how the ocean would turn an inky black, and how the next morning piles of rotten fish would line the shore. This made the ocean a confusing place for Richard. Some days in his youth he would beg his parents to let him go to the ocean with his friends to play, and they would deny him. Other times he would sneak away, go to the ocean to play. He never saw this inky black abyss his parents spoke of, or the merfolk that helped children. All he ever saw was the calm, serene, beautiful glasscape. The diner that Richard had found himself working at was on the shoreline, with a nice view of the ocean, hence the diner's name of Ocean Point Diner. There was another person who worked with him at the diner, a girl named Lily. She was very kind and sweet and loved to help people. One day, an elderly gentleman, seemingly a detective, made his way into the diner while Richard was leaving for home to have lunch. An hour passed, and Richard finished his lunch and made his way back to the diner, only to find it empty, except for the chef in the back. Richard asked the chef what had happened to Lily and the detective, and the chef claimed he'd never had anyone working at this diner by that name, or seen a customer come in looking like that. As Richard left for the evening, locking up the front door, he stepped back to begin to walk home, as a loud crunch happened. Thinking he stepped on a crab, he looked down to see where the crunch emanated, to see a strange-looking piece of stone on the floor. It looked as if it may have once been part of a statue. Journal entry, October 1st, 1923. Hello again, friend. Some interesting things are going on again, but this time it's not in my dreams. More on that in a moment. But at the diner the other day, John claimed he had never heard of anyone named Lily, let alone had anyone working there. This feels so unsettling. She was literally working there with him that day, and spoke with him all day. And to make things worse, as I left, I stepped on something hard, and when I looked back to see, it looked like the eye part of a statue. I'm not sure what it was, but it didn't feel right looking at it. It almost felt as if the eye looked sad. Now for the nightmare. Something finally changed in it. There was a new set of crying and screaming sounds, but I couldn't quite pick out where they were coming from. And as I made my way through the alleyways of nothingness that eventually led to the statues, I noticed there was one in there that was already missing its eye. And this time, as I made my way to the pier, there was something moving around in the inky black. When I woke this time as well, it wasn't just the salty sea air, but the stench of dead and rotting fish and small pieces of rubble in my bed. Richard that morning, or what was morning to him, got ready for work and started to make his way to the diner. It was cold, and the air almost had a thick feeling to it, as if it had weight. He began to notice as he was walking to the diner that it was silent and dark. No lights were on in houses, no cars running. No people were walking to go shopping, spend time at the beach. It was noiseless. Richard started running, calling out to people, to anyone, and only the void called back with silence. As he grew closer to the beach, he began to hear the faint echoes of crying, of screams that were distant yet close. And as Richard finally reached the marina, he was hit square in the face by the stench of death and decay. The beach was covered in piles of dead, rotting fish, Anything from a small minnow all the way up to sharks. Feeling a compulsive need and an almost uncontrollable urge to venture forth, Richard soon found himself, without even realizing it, at the steps to the pier. As he made his way up the steps, he noticed the horrifying visages of people from his town. The Bakers who lived down the street. The Adams who lived just next door. Even John was there. As Richard passed each statue, each and every one of them had a look of horror, disgust, and anguish on their faces. Eventually, he came to a female statue, one that was missing its eye, only to realize it was Lily. He blinked, trying to process what he was seeing, and yet again, without realizing it, he now found himself at the edge of the pier, staring out into the inky black, only this time to now realize something gargantuan was staring back at him. There we go. That's our final story for tonight. Extractor, that was amazing and terrifying, and I feel like it painted a picture the whole way. A picture I never wanted to see in my entire life, but thank you all the same. I hope all of you cuties out there watching this video were just as enthralled by these wonderful stories as I was. They really hit home for this Halloween season, and it definitely made my day. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I think I want to do another video like this for next Halloween, but let me know what you guys think. Tell me in the comments below if you liked this. Was it too long? Were the stories not to your liking? Or, other things of that sort. And or, of course, if you did love them, and I'd love to know what all of your favorite stories were. I'm going to be reopening the Halloween Story Submissions channel just for today, so that way all of you guys can read all the other stories that didn't make it into the selection, as well as reread some of your favorites, maybe with some friends. That is, if you don't want to show them my video. With that, I think we're out of time. This one's definitely been long, and I hope it was wonderful. Happy Halloween, cuties, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.